This is the story of a man who lost everything and then became something no one saw coming. The cops said it was a break-in gone wrong. Wrong house, wrong time. But nothing was stolen, except his wife's life. No prints, no footage. Just a clean shot to the back of the head and a glitch in the cameras. They called it random. He called it what it was, a message. And when the system shrugged her death away, he erased his old name and started hunting the ones who thought they'd silenced her. Because she didn't just die, she uncovered something. Something built on billions and blood. And now, one by one, the men who buried her truth are finding out what real fear feels like. When justice doesn't knock, it breaks in. The cops said it was a break-in gone wrong. Wrong house, wrong time, wrong victim. That's what they told me. They said the men were high, masked, armed. They kicked the door in around 2 a.m., expecting a quick in and out. They said she must have startled them, tried to run, and got shot in the chaos. They said it all like they'd rehearsed it 100 times. But I saw the crime scene, and nothing about it said chaos. The shot was clean, one to the back of the head, execution style. No signs of struggle, nothing taken. Her wedding ring still on, jewelry untouched, wallet in plain sight. The house wasn't ransacked. It was silent. Still, they didn't rob her. They came to kill her. The detectives barely looked at me when I said it. Sir, this is how these things go sometimes. Tragic, senseless. I asked about the security footage. We had 3 cameras. Front door, hallway, backyard. All wiped. They said the system must have glitched. A glitch. They shrugged. Said it was random. They'd look into it. They never did. The local news ran the headline for 2 days, then moved on. Just another faceless tragedy in a city drowning in them. The world forgot her name, but I didn't. Her name was Rachel, my wife, my home, and they didn't just kill her. They unmade me. The first night alone, I didn't sleep. I sat in her closet for hours, breathing in the faint scent left on her sweaters. Every sound in the house echoed. Every silence was heavier than steel. I knew this wasn't random. Rachel was careful. She never left the door unlocked. She didn't open it for strangers. She never kept friends with dangerous secrets. But she did work in finance, mid-level at a firm that handled more money than most people could imagine. I remembered one night, 3 weeks before the shooting. She came home late, quiet, shaken. She didn't say what happened, just kissed me harder than usual, told me she loved me. I should have pressed. I should have asked more. Instead, I held her, let her think silence was safe. That was my first mistake. I called her office after the funeral, asked questions, got stonewalled. They said she was part of a team, said her accounts were locked pending internal audits. I asked about the audit. They hung up. Next, I went through her things, her laptop, her files, her notes. Buried in a folder marked taxes, I found something strange. Screenshots. Account numbers, charts, transfers. None of it made sense at first. Then I saw the names. Fake shell companies. Routing numbers to untraceable destinations. One phrase kept showing up. Project Dustline. I started digging. The deeper I went, the darker it got. Dustline was a code for a laundering operation. Money funneled through real estate shells, tech startups, energy firms. Billions moved through forged hands, cleaned and rerouted to politicians, foreign arms dealers, and American defense contractors. Rachel found it. She tracked the flow. And someone found out. So they made it look like noise-mashed men. Random break-in, no trace. Only it was a message. I sold the house. Burned the furniture, left the city. I stopped being me. The man I used to be, Jared Connors, age 34, software engineer, suburban husband, weekend golfer, he died with her. What remained was a machine fueled by rage. I spent the first 3 months learning how to disappear, how to live off the grid, how to find people who didn't want to be found. I used cash, bought old burner phones, changed names every week. Then I found a trainer, ex-Black Ops. Now a drunk living in a trailer behind a gun range. His name was Blake. He didn't ask questions. He took my money and broke me down to nothing, then built me back into something else. He taught me how to shoot, how to clear rooms, how to move through streets without being seen, how to kill quietly. He taught me about patience and how revenge isn't loud. It's surgical. When I was ready, I returned, not to the house, not to the city, but to the silence that had swallowed the truth. I went after the footage first, traced the security company we'd used, dug into the system logs, found the remote access used to wipe the file, spoofed IP, military-grade access key. But it wasn't perfect. The signature traced back to a private contractor in Virginia, a firm called Novaris Intel. On the surface, they were cybersecurity. Beneath, they handled dirty work for corporate clients, blackmail, data destruction, threat neutralization. Rachel's firm had contracted them 6 months before her death. The man who authorized the contract was named Wesley Hart. I found him in a gated community near Alexandria. I waited until midnight, broke in through the back. He was asleep when I pressed the barrel to his temple. He woke with a gasp, tried to scream. I covered his mouth. "Rachel Connors, why did you kill her? I don't know what you're doing." The first punch cracked his nose. The second took his teeth. Then he remembered. Team was flagged, a threat to operations. She accessed internal files. We were told she'd go public. So you erased her. I didn't pull the trigger. We passed it on to an outside crew, subcontracted. Who paid for it? He hesitated, then said a name I hadn't heard before. Garrett Dell. He signed off. Who is he? Board member at Lincroft Capital. They funded Dustline. They were exposed. I tied Wesley to a chair, smashed his laptop, took his phone. Then I burned his house down. He screamed behind duct tape as the flames reached the second floor. I didn't stay to watch him die, but I waited long enough to hear the beams start to snap. Then I disappeared again. One name down, Mane more to go. Gardell would be next, and when I reached him, he'd look into my eyes and see her face. And then he'd know. The nightmare had arrived. Garrett Dell wasn't a coward. He didn't hide. He wore his guilt like armor, polished and smug. He still made public appearances, shook hands at galas, gave interviews about innovation and global strategy. But behind the staged smiles and designer suits, he carried the blood of everyone who tried to speak the truth, including Rachel. I found him at a fundraising dinner in Manhattan. He was talking about humanitarian outreach while drinking wine that cost more than most people's rent. I didn't move on him there. I followed him after, waited as he stepped into his armored car, tracked him to a penthouse suite guarded by private security. I waited a week, memorized the patterns, shift changes, windows of silence. Then I struck. I climbed the building 3 floors up, came down through the utility shaft. By the time the alarm tripped, I was already in his living room. He walked out of the bedroom in a robe, saw me, stopped. I raised the gun. "Jared Connors," he said, not surprised. "I knew you'd come." "Then you knew what this was." "I didn't kill her myself." "No, you just paid for it." He took a breath. She had files. She threatened disclosure. If she'd gone public, the fund would have collapsed. Thousands of investors, pension plans, government accounts. You think I could let that fall apart over one woman? I stared at him. She was my woman. I regret the method, not the result. That was all I needed. I shot him in the chest. Not quick. Not clean. I let him crawl, let him choke on every lie he ever sold. Then I left his body slumped against the glass, blood pooling beneath the skyline. The news called it an assassination. Whispers spread through the elite. Lencroft issued a statement, called it unrelated. But I wasn't finished. Next was the man who ordered the hit team, Anthony Knox, ex-military, now a broker of blood. He ran operations out of South Carolina, training mercs, scrubbing problems. Rachel was one of his contracts. I tracked him to a private range, remote, fenced, surrounded by ex-soldiers. I waited until storm season, used the blackout as cover, slipped in during a thunderclap. Knox was in his office, polishing a rifle. I put 2 in his legs before he could move. He dropped hard, screamed, reached for a drawer. Then I crushed his hand with the butt of the gun. The thick layers. She had names. She accessed the second ledger. She wasn't just a whistleblower. She had receipts. You could have leaked it, let her live. She was a risk. I dragged him to the shooting range, tied him to a post, left his mouth open to the rain. He begged. I taped the photo of Rachel to his chest, then shot through it. 3 more died that month. Un ran to Europe, found him in Berlin. Silence shot through the eye. Another tried to cut a deal. I took the confession, then took his tongue. The last one called me, said he wanted to surrender. I let him. Then I watched the light leave his eyes after I showed him the pictures. Rachel's face, their contracts, their secrets, his blood, no mercy, no forgiveness. Each one knew why it was happening. Each one died understanding they weren't murdered by a man who'd already buried the law and now only followed the weight of his own justice. By winter, the name Jared Connors was on every blacklist. They didn't put my face on the news, but the people who mattered knew. The ones who ran the circuits, funded the operations, paid men to disappear problems. They were scared, not because I was a ghost, because I was precise. Every kill was documented. Every message was carved into the aftermath. Rachel's initials on a casing, a red string through a ledger, a single sentence burned into a desk with acid. This was not a robbery. The last name on my list wasn't just a man. It was a family. The Brecker Group, a dynasty of old money wrapped in modern finance. Untouchable. For decades, they'd propped up political campaigns, bought out judges, and smiled for the cameras while building empires from blood and theft. Rachel uncovered one of their deepest secrets, an offshore laundering channel disguised as disaster relief. She flagged the pattern, exposed it internally. One of the Brecker sons saw it. He made the call. I spent 4 weeks studying their compound outside Houston. 4-story fortress, bulletproof windows, ex-Marines on rotation. Surveillance blind spots were rare, but every security system has a hole. You just have to know where to look. I went in as a groundskeeper, papers forged, references solid. They never looked twice. I worked quietly, cleaned tools, mowed grass, watched them walk by in silk robes while sipping $6,000 wine. I waited until the old man, Walter Brecker, was away at a board meeting in D.C. I made my move. His son, Logan, came out to the garden for his usual smoke. I met him by the greenhouse. He didn't recognize me until I pulled the trigger. On shot to his stomach. Not fatal, not yet. He fell, gasping, blood mixing with the dirt. Where did you kill her? He blinked fast, mouth full of copper. I don't, I pressed the muzzle to his chin. Thick letters showing that your name, she found your fund. She was going to bury us. You buried her instead? I didn't pull the trigger. Neither did she. I left him alive just long enough to see the fire. I set the greenhouse ablaze, slow burn from the base up. Let it swallow the glass, the flowers, the lies. He died screaming. His body was found the next day, and the Brecker family knew exactly why. They called in a private team, retired CIA, hunters, trained to track ghosts. But I was already gone. The next message wasn't a body. It was a file drop, 3 terabytes of stolen financial records. All of it traced back to the Brecker's disaster fraud, insider trading, political blackmail, Rachel's final discovery. I leaked it to every journalist who ever owed her a favor. They ran the story like a wildfire, The Breckers were dragged in front of federal hearings, assets frozen, bail denied, and for the first time in decades, the system they built started to crack. I watched it all from a motel room 2 states away. Her picture beside me, the last whisper of her voice still echoing in the back of my skull. I didn't smile, not yet. I wasn't done, because the man who pulled the trigger still breathed. He had no name in the files, no face in the footage, but I remembered his tattoo, a black raven on the hand, a mark used by one mercenary crew, the Fallow Syndicate. And if I found one of them, I'd find the man who killed Rachel, and I'd show him what a nightmare truly looks like. The Fallow Syndicate wasn't listed in any public database, no website, no business cards, just a whisper in military back channels. They were contractors without uniforms, guns for hire, who answered to silence, not country. Rachel's killer was one of them. I tracked them through patterns, shipping manifests, hotel stays, blacklisted IDs used too often in the same regions. Eventually, I found one man tied to their movements. Travis Dane, a former recon sniper turned shadow broker. He lived in an abandoned oil town in West Texas under the name Ellis, off-grid, satellite dishes pointed at nothing. The kind of place where people don't visit twice. I went in through the desert, no car, no tracks. The house was quiet. Cracked windows, wind slicing through gaps in the wall. He was inside cleaning a rifle. I kicked the door open and fired once, through the shoulder. He dropped, screamed, tried to reach for the weapon. I shot the hand. He howled, fell back against a rusted fridge. "Where is he?" I asked. "Is he of our own? I don't know what you're—" I stepped on the bleeding hand. "Black Raven tattoo. You hired him." His eyes blinked fast. "He doesn't go by names. We don't ask. We pass the job and forget it." "What was the job?" "Clean kill. Silent. No mess, no signature. Brecker money. Woman flagged. Internal threat. You knew she wasn't a threat to you. It didn't matter?" I dragged him to a chair, duct-taped his legs, crushed his phone. Then I searched his files. On a burner laptop buried under floorboards, I found a list of transactions, payment logs, job codes. One stood out. Code M14. Target, Rachel Connors. Contractor, Arvale. Real name, Reed Vale. There was an address, coordinates, somewhere in Montana. A cabin in the pines. No neighbors, no roads. Perfect place for a man who thinks his past is buried. I left Dane there. He wasn't worth a bullet. I made it to Montana by bus, then by stolen car. Camped for 2 days in the woods, watching the cabin. Reed was alone. Graybeard, broad frame, quiet. He chopped wood like he still had purpose. I waited until night. Broke the window. Crept inside. He turned just as I stepped from the shadows. He didn't reach for a gun. He didn't speak. He just stared. "You know who I am," I said. He nodded. "You killed her." "I don't remember faces," he said. "Just orders. You'll remember this one." I pulled the photo from my pocket. Rachel smiling. I shoved it in his face. "You took this from me." He sat on the floor, hands resting on his knees. No fight, no rage. "You think this will fix you?" he asked. "No," I said. "But it'll end you." "Then do it." I didn't. Not right away. I wanted him to understand. I told him everything. How they called it a robbery. How they erased her. How they thought silence was enough. And how I made sure it screamed. He closed his eyes. "I was a weapon," he said. "No excuses." "Then die like one." I shot him once. Then again. And again. Until the clip was empty. The cabin burned behind me as I walked into the trees. No police came. No questions asked. I disappeared again. This time, not out of fear, but because my war was finished. Rachel was gone. Her voice still lived in my head, soft, constant, but now it came without the weight, just memory, not misery. I moved north, bought a cabin with cash, changed my name again, took nothing with me but her photo. Sometimes I hear things. News about the collapse of Brecker Holdings, the arrests, the asset seizures. Justice never came from the law. It came from me. And in the quiet, where only trees can hear, I say her name every night. Rachel. She was light in a world of knives. And now every shadow that once hid a killer knows her name. Because I made sure the last thing they saw before the trigger clicked was her face. Ed mine.